What's going on, guys? And today we start off the career retrospectives for the event on Saturday night, UFC Fight Night, Dos Santos versus Lewis. And we start off the career retrospectives looking at NIKO the Hybrid Price, one of the best strikers in the UFC's welterweight division. NIKO Price isn't the most technical striker in the world, but every single one of his fights is exciting. And anytime he finds the finish, it's rather brutal. And almost in all of his fights, and even his losses, they have been some of the most brutal fights I've ever seen, and brutal finishes. NIKO Price has become one of the most exciting fighters in the UFC and is the go-to for the UFC to fill out a fight card. If you want a main event guy, this guy's your go-to. NIKO will be facing off against Tim Means this Saturday night on Fight Night, Dos Santos versus Lewis, and it will be the third fight on the main card. The hybrid wants to finish Tim Means to get back into the top 15 in the UFC welterweight division. NIKO only started MMA in 2012 and is entering his MMA prime right around now at the age of 29. Price actually had a 9-fight amateur career and went undefeated into his pro career. NIKO would spend his entire career outside the UFC and the Fight Time promotions under the banner of Alliance MMA Incorporated. NIKO would fight and win on Fight Time 8, It's Fight Time, and finish off his career for Fight Time Promotions on Fight Time 32 with his 8th straight win under the promotion. And listen to this, an interesting fact. After 8 fights in Fight Time, NIKO only spent a total time equivalent to 5 rounds inside the octagon. NIKO Price finished his fight 6 by TKO, 1 by submission, and only had 1 decision on his exit to the UFC. Since his debut in the UFC, Price has begun to stack UFC fights, making him some sort of a young UFC veteran. It's very rare that we see guys with only 15 fights having 7 of them take place in the UFC. Some superstars don't even get into the UFC until they have 10 to 20 fights. Ben Askren, who just fought this recent weekend, is a perfect example of this, who had to win 18 in a row before getting his shot in the UFC. Nevertheless, in the hybrid's 9th fight, he'd be making a take on another UFC consistent welterweight in Brandon Thatch. However, Thatch would be on an extremely bad run of fights. Following 4 losses, this would be his last fight in the UFC. Price dispatched Thatch in 1 round, winning the fight with a mounted arm triangle. This would be the debut Price fight that he would have wanted to make an impact. His next fight would be a win against Alex Moreno, but in a disgraceful rule that somehow deems marijuana as a performance-enhancing substance, Price's 2nd round finish was overturned into a no contest, and now his UFC record would be 1-0-1. Since that 2017 no contest, Price has been on an up-and-down spurt, getting some wins together but losing just before he could get himself into the top 15 at welterweight. His next fight was a win against Alan Jouban. NIKO Price is seriously a guy that stands out on the feet and has instincts to kill. Combine that with his power, and you get what happened to Alan Jouban. 1 minute and 44 seconds into round number 1, the fight was stopped, and NIKO Price was the victor by TKO. This would mark NIKO Price's current 4-fight streak, being 2-2 in his last outings. His first loss ever came in a matchup against fellow striker Vicente Luque, who just had a Fight of the Year candidate with Brian Barbanera 2 fight cards ago, where NIKO Price was actually submitted via a Darce choke. Luque put on an onslaught on Price in the 2nd round, rocking NIKO Price multiple times on the feet. Price's resilience was damn near impeccable and wouldn't go out. It wasn't until Luque rolled Price into the Darce that the fight was over. NIKO, following the loss, would pick up steam again with back-to-back wins. One against George Sullivan with a rear naked choke, and one against Dana White's looking for a fighter star, Randy Brown. The Randy Brown finish more notable as the win wasn't seen before. Price finished the fight from the bottom with hammer fists to Brown's exposed chin. With another opportunity at top 15 rankings, Price was signed to fight the extremely heavy-handed Abdul Razak Al Hassan, where the fight went down basically as who will fall first, and both men just slugged out their biggest strikes in the first minute. With NIKO Price riding the 2-fight win streak, it seemed very, very possible that with this win he would be in a top 15. Sadly, NIKO Price was on the end of a huge combination, starting with an Al Hassan right hand that put Price out. This was Price's last outing inside the UFC octagon, but he's going to look to bounce back against Tim Means and find his way to the top 15, hopefully with a win in this fight. He might be on a rocky road now, but Price is one of the most exciting fighters on the roster and is becoming more and more of a UFC veteran with every trip to the UFC octagon. Again, I like to mention how interesting it is to see a guy with only 15 fights that has already seen 7 inside the UFC octagon. You can already tell this guy's not going to be jittery under the bright lights, and I can bet you a lot of money that this NIKO Price Tim Means fight is going to be a stand-up slugfest war, or Tim Means is going to try and get it to the ground. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed this career retrospective and want to see more, remember to subscribe down below and like the video. Every time I get a like on this series, I want to make more. The next 2 episodes will be tomorrow. We will be taking a look at the newest heavyweight in the UFC roster who's only had 1 fight in the UFC, Blagoy Ivanov. And we will also be looking at another super striker in Elizeu Zaleski dos Santos. Thank you guys again so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.